Hi, I'm Nova, 28, and today started like any normal Sunday brunch until my sister casually announced she inherited Aunt Margaret's mansion. I froze, my heart sinking, and then my phone buzzed. A strange email appeared, hinting at secrets I never expected. What I discovered next changed everything between us. Tell me, where are you watching from? Comment below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about family drama, secrets, and emotional courage. I've always been the middle child in a family that somehow favors charm over quiet determination. Today was supposed to be a normal Sunday brunch with my parents and my sister Claire. But within the first few minutes, the calm clatter of silverware and soft chatter turned into something I could never have predicted. Claire leaned back in her chair, her phone buzzing on the table as if on cue, and casually announced, "Guess what, everyone? I got the mansion." I froze mid-bite. The words hit me like a sudden winter chill. I could feel the syrupy pancakes sliding halfway down my throat before I even realized I hadn't swallowed. The mansion, that old, sprawling estate Aunt Margaret had always teased us about in family stories. Everyone else seemed to take it lightly. Our parents smiled politely, a little too proudly, but inside, I felt a twist of disbelief and bitter envy knotting my stomach. I glanced at Claire. She was practically glowing, like the world had just opened a golden door exclusively for her. My mind raced. I had imagined this brunch as a place to relax, to enjoy the smell of eggs and bacon, maybe hear a funny story from Mom about something trivial. Instead, it had turned into a stage where my sister's life suddenly seemed brighter, bigger, and untouchable. "Wow, congratulations," I said carefully, forcing a smile while my hands trembled slightly. I wasn't sure if it was anger or shock, or maybe both. Claire's eyes sparkled as she took a sip of her coffee, entirely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Thanks, Nova. I know you'll be happy for me." Her tone was sweet, almost practiced, but it felt like a knife, precise and deliberate, even if unintentional. Mom chimed in, her voice soft but carrying that familiar undertone of favoritism. "We're so proud of you, Claire. Aunt Margaret always knew you'd make the most of it." My fork clattered against the plate. The sound seemed absurdly loud in the quiet tension. I looked down, wishing the floor would open up and swallow me. I had always imagined being noticed, being appreciated, but somehow the universe had chosen her. And it wasn't just any inheritance. It was the ultimate symbol of recognition I had craved silently for years. As my mind reeled, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I didn't want to look at it, but curiosity overpowered me. Pulling it out discreetly, I saw a new email notification. The sender unknown, subject line simple but urgent. "You need to see this before it's too late." My pulse quickened. The timing felt uncanny, almost like fate was mocking me. I quickly hid the phone under the table, pretending to adjust my napkin. Claire, oblivious to my inner turmoil, continued her cheerful chatter, detailing the amazing features of the mansion. The sunroom overlooking the garden, the old library with creaky floors, and the endless hallways that once seemed intimidating in childhood stories. Her enthusiasm should have been endearing, but all I could feel was the raw sting of exclusion. I had spent years dreaming of a life that seemed just out of reach, and suddenly it was hers, effortlessly. Dad, trying to lighten the mood, cracked a small joke about Claire hosting the next family reunion in her new mansion. Laughter followed, polite and tight around the edges, but I couldn't bring myself to participate. Every chuckle felt like a reminder that I was being left behind. I stared at my plate, at the eggs turning cold, at the way the sunlight caught the glass of orange juice in front of me, mocking me with its ordinary perfection. The tension in the room was subtle but sharp. Claire's smile was too wide, Mom's nods too approving, Dad's humor too forced. Even our younger cousin, Ellie, who usually bounced around like a little whirlwind, seemed subdued, her eyes darting between us as if sensing the invisible line of rivalry that had suddenly drawn itself across the table. I tried to participate, to ask a question about the mansion's neighborhood or the kind of furniture Claire planned to have. But my words stumbled, awkward, and hesitant. Claire, ever the social butterfly, answered with perfect poise, wrapping each sentence in charm. I felt myself shrinking further into my chair, like the sunlight streaming through the kitchen window was spotlighting her and leaving me in shadow. As the brunch continued, my internal conflict grew. I wanted to be happy for her. I really did. But the feeling was tangled with disbelief, hurt, and something I wasn't ready to name. A part of me resented the simplicity with which life seemed to hand her exactly what I had been silently yearning for. I reminded myself, this was family, this was love, but my heart betrayed me, simmering with jealousy and confusion. Then, as if the universe weren't satisfied with just emotional torment, my phone vibrated again. I stole another glance under the table. The email was still there, waiting. My hand hovered over it, hesitant, like touching it might change something irrevocably. Should I open it now, or wait until the chaos of brunch had passed? Every instinct screamed caution, yet the gnawing curiosity refused to let me look away. Claire excused herself to the kitchen to grab more coffee. I watched her walk away, the polished leather shoes clicking against the tile, and felt a pang of bitterness and longing collide. I remembered the afternoons we spent in Aunt Margaret's garden as kids, imagining what it would be like to live in that mansion. I had dreamed of walking through those hallways, hearing the creak of old floors beneath my feet, imagining it as mine someday. But now all those childhood dreams were hers, and I was left sitting in a sunny kitchen, struggling to process what mine even meant anymore. Mom started clearing plates, chatting with Dad about the chores after brunch, but I barely heard them. My eyes kept drifting to the email notification, to the strange words that promised urgency, secrecy, and perhaps a hint of revelation. What did it mean? Was it connected to Claire's inheritance? Or was it something entirely different, something I wasn't prepared for? The tension inside me became almost physical. My shoulders stiffened, my jaw clenched, and my mind replayed the moment Claire had uttered the word mansion again and again. The emotional shock had thrown off everything. The casual humor, the ordinary setting, even the warmth of the sunlight seemed tainted now. I could almost hear an echo of my own voice, small and unheard, murmuring, "Why her? Why not me?" Even as I tried to engage, offering polite comments about the scrambled eggs or complimenting the fresh fruit, my attention kept snapping back to Claire's laughter, the glint of pride in her eyes, and that email waiting silently in my pocket. It felt like the start of something bigger, something I couldn't yet name, a shift in family dynamics, a crack in the facade of normalcy, and the opening of a chapter one wasn't sure I was ready to face. I noticed small things I hadn't before, the way Claire's hand lingered on her coffee cup, as if savoring triumph, the subtle glance she shot at Mom, the way Dad nodded approvingly, almost without noticing me. It all built a tapestry of exclusion that I couldn't unsee. And beneath it all, the email pulsed like a heartbeat against my leg, a whisper of something that demanded attention. By the time brunch was winding down, with empty plates and a lingering scent of maple syrup in the air, I realized I was holding more than just jealousy. I was holding questions, suspicions, and a deep, gnawing awareness that nothing about today's normal family brunch would ever be the same. Claire had the mansion. Yes, but there was a strange email, a hint of secret knowledge, and a personal reckoning brewing that I didn't yet understand. I glanced around the room once more at the familiar faces of my parents and cousins and wondered how easily appearances could mask tension. I wondered what the email meant, why it had arrived just now, and whether it would lead me down a path of discovery or danger. My hand brushed it lightly again, my heartbeat quickening, the ordinary Sunday transformed into a crucible of suspense and emotional upheaval. Finally, as Claire returned with her coffee, smiling triumphantly, I forced another smile, hiding the storm inside. I felt the story beginning, not just of her inheritance, not just of a brunch gone wrong, but of the moment everything shifted in my life. And deep down, I knew that email was the key, the first step into a new, unpredictable chapter. I turned slightly to the camera, if you will, and whispered internally, "This is only the beginning." So before I dive into everything that happened next, I want to ask, you watching this right now, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, because I love seeing the places people tune in from. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about family drama, secrets, and finding your inner courage. Stories like this one that change everything in a single moment. As the last clatter of brunch dishes faded and the scent of coffee lingered in the air, my mind kept circling back to the strange email blinking at me from my phone. I had managed to hide it under the table during the family chaos. But now, with Claire smiling triumphantly over her new prize and the room settling into post-meal chatter, I couldn't ignore it any longer. My hand hovered over the screen, hesitation warring with curiosity. Every instinct screamed caution, yet the gnawing need to understand overpowered fear. With a shallow breath, I tapped the email open. The subject line was simple, almost clinical, "Before it's too late." My stomach tightened. The message itself was even stranger, short, cryptic, and unsettling, like a puzzle designed to pull me in without offering any immediate answers. It read, "Nova, your sister's inheritance is not what it seems. Look closely. Trust your instincts. Do not tell anyone yet." I blinked at the words, my mind racing. Who would send me this? Why now? And how would they know I was sitting here, trying to process Claire's sudden mansion news? I felt a shiver trace down my spine, part anticipation, part dread. My fingers tightened around the phone. The casual Sunday brunch had suddenly turned into something entirely unrecognizable, an ordinary morning eclipsed by secrecy and potential betrayal. I leaned back in my chair, pretending to stretch, my eyes darting to Claire as she laughed at a joke Dad made about her hosting the next family gathering. Her joy was effortless, and the stark contrast between her bright demeanor and the anxious, nodding feeling in my chest made the tension feel almost tangible. I didn't want to alarm anyone, yet the email's message nagged at the edges of my thoughts, demanding attention. I felt like I had stumbled into a room where everyone else had the script, but I had been handed only cryptic stage directions. The words in the email looped over and over in my mind. "Your sister's inheritance is not what it seems." I couldn't help but replay every interaction of the morning, trying to spot inconsistencies I might have missed. Maybe it was the way Claire had casually brushed over certain details when describing the mansion. Maybe it was how Mom's eyes had lingered a little too long on Claire's excitement. Every glance, every word suddenly felt loaded, as if the normal rhythm of family life had hidden undercurrents I had never noticed before. I excused myself to the bathroom, ostensibly to wash my hands, but in truth, I needed a private space to think. My phone rested on the counter. The email opened like a small beacon in a world that had just grown larger and more complex. My reflection in the mirror stared back at me, eyes wide, lips pressed together, fingers nervously drumming against the sink. I had always trusted Claire, had always believed our family operated in a transparent, if flawed, way. But this email whispered a different truth, one that I wasn't sure I was prepared to face. I tapped the phone again, hesitating before opening the attachments hinted at in the email. A scanned document, apparently a legal form of some kind. revealed just enough to make my pulse race. Terms and clauses I didn't fully understand hinted that the mansion came with strings attached, obligations that were not apparent to Claire or to anyone else in the family. The more I read, the more I realized this inheritance might not be a straightforward blessing, but a carefully layered puzzle with consequences lurking beneath the surface. As I studied the document, I felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. The fear was obvious. I had no idea what this could mean, or if it could somehow backfire on me or Claire. The excitement was quieter, almost thrilling. Here was a secret, something hidden in plain sight that no one else seemed aware of. I felt an adrenaline surge, a flicker of power in being the only one who might understand what was really happening. When I returned to the kitchen, Claire was already on her phone, texting or scrolling, completely immersed in her world. Mom and Dad were discussing weekend plans, oblivious to the storm brewing in my chest. I tried to act casual, sipping my coffee slowly, letting the email's knowledge simmer in the back of my mind. Every laugh, every word from Claire, felt slightly off-key now. The mansion wasn't just a symbol of her success. It was a key to something bigger, something I wasn't yet sure I could grasp. I decided I needed context. I quietly pulled Claire's phone closer under the table, hoping for a clue, but she had locked it with a code I didn't know. The realization stung. Not just that I couldn't access her phone, but that she had secrets, tiny digital fortresses she was guarding even from family. I had always known she was clever, but now her cleverness felt like a wall between us, a barrier I was suddenly determined to understand. The room felt heavier as the brunch continued. Conversations around me blurred, as if filtered through a gauzy layer of suspicion. My mind darted between recalling past family events and analyzing Claire's reactions this morning. I remembered the way she had seemed unusually confident when discussing the mansion, almost rehearsed. I remembered Dad's approving nods, Mom's careful praise, and even Ellie's quiet curiosity. Every micro-expression suddenly seemed like a piece of a puzzle that might reveal a hidden truth. I excused myself again, this time to the backyard under the pretense of checking the garden. The sun was bright, the air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass, but I barely noticed. My phone buzzed once more. Another short message, this one only a sentence. Watch closely. Not everything is as it appears. I froze, staring at the text, heart thudding. Whoever was sending these messages knew something, or wanted me to believe they did. My curiosity teetered dangerously on obsession. As I paced the small garden, I noticed tiny details I had overlooked before. The way a neighbor's window faced the street where the mansion stood, the quiet hum of passing cars, even the way birds scattered when someone walked nearby. Every ordinary element suddenly felt loaded, as if each one might hold a clue. My mind, previously numb from jealousy and shock, now sparked with strategy, observation, and suspicion. I returned inside, more alert than before. Claire was arranging plates into the dishwasher, humming lightly. Mom had drifted into the living room to water the plants. Dad was reading a magazine, and Ellie had quietly escaped to the porch with her coloring book. I felt a flicker of isolation, but also clarity. The brunch, once ordinary and comfortable, had transformed into a scene of hidden currents and quiet tensions. I decided I needed more information, but carefully. I couldn't confront Claire, not yet. Doing so would raise questions and possibly alert her to the fact that I had received the emails. Instead, I began mentally noting patterns, the timing of her words, the casual mentions of the mansion's features, and any small contradictions in her stories. I listened harder, observed more keenly, and allowed myself to notice even the smallest gestures that might hint at a hidden layer of truth. By mid-afternoon, the brunch had concluded, and family members began gathering their things to leave. Claire was still buzzing with excitement, talking about which rooms she wanted to redecorate first. I smiled politely, but inwardly, a new purpose had formed. The strange emails had shifted my focus from passive jealousy to active curiosity. I realized I wasn't just witnessing a family event, I was stepping into a mystery that only I could navigate. Before anyone left, I slipped quietly into the kitchen, retrieving my phone. I stared at the inbox one last time, rereading the cryptic messages. Every word, every punctuation mark, seemed deliberate, a breadcrumb trail meant to lead me somewhere I didn't yet understand. My emotions were tangled. Fear, excitement, jealousy, and a strange thrill coursing through me. I knew the ordinary rhythm of life had changed forever. As I watched Claire hug Mom and Dad goodbye, laughing and chatting with effortless charm, I felt a mix of resolve and tension coil in my chest. The mansion, the emails, and the hidden knowledge, they were mine to unravel. And though I didn't yet understand the full scope of what I had stepped into, I knew one thing with absolute clarity: nothing about my sister's inheritance, or the secrets surrounding it, would remain simple for long. I sank onto the kitchen chair, breathing deeply, letting the sunlight warm my tense shoulders. My mind whirred with possibilities, strategies, and questions that demanded answers. The emails weren't just messages, they were invitations, warnings, and perhaps the start of something I could not yet define. And as the day continued to stretch ahead, I understood that the ordinary Sunday brunch had become the catalyst for a journey of suspicion, revelation, and personal awakening I could no longer avoid. After the brunch had ended and the house quieted down, I found myself lingering in the living room, my phone balanced on my lap, still glowing with the cryptic messages from the mysterious sender. The sun filtered through the blinds, casting striped patterns across the floor, yet I hardly noticed the warmth. My mind was elsewhere, replaying every subtle exchange from the morning and hunting for clues that had previously gone unnoticed. I realized, almost with a jolt, that the clues might have been there all along, hidden in plain sight. Claire's casual confidence, the subtle gleam of pride in her eyes, even the way Mom's compliments had been slightly uneven. Details I had dismissed as normal behavior now felt deliberate, layered with meaning I hadn't been aware enough to catch before. The mansion, the inheritance, the email, they were threads weaving into a web, and I had suddenly become hyper-aware of the spaces between them. I began my quiet investigation in the living room, books set neatly on the shelves, but one caught my eye, a dusty ledger tucked behind a row of novels, almost camouflaged in the shadows. Curious, I reached for it. Flipping through, I found handwritten notes, dates, names, and references to Aunt Margaret's property that didn't match what Claire had said during brunch. It wasn't anything overtly alarming, but the discrepancies were enough to spark suspicion. Why would Claire misstate facts, even in small ways? And why had no one else noticed these subtle inconsistencies before? I moved to the kitchen, where crumbs and a faint scent of syrup still lingered. Claire had left her planner open, a colorful chaos of notes and reminders. One sticky note stood out: final inspection of mansion, hidden clauses. I froze. My pulse quickened. Hidden clauses? What had Claire discovered, or been told, that no one else had? The email's warning echoed in my mind. Look closely. Not everything is as it appears. The connection was uncanny, almost too deliberate. Someone wanted me to pay attention, and maybe this planner had been the next breadcrumb. I decided to look further, walking down the hall to Claire's old bedroom, now mostly cleared for storage. The door creaked faintly as I opened it, revealing boxes labeled with Aunt Margaret's name. I pulled out one at random, cautiously rifling through letters and documents. Most were mundane, small notes and recipes, but one envelope caught my eye, marked with the date of Aunt Margaret's will signing, and tucked inside were letters suggesting conditions for the mansion's inheritance. I held my breath, scanning the words. There were subtle stipulations about maintaining certain aspects of the property, and hints that some family members might not have been entirely truthful in their dealings. My thoughts raced. Could this be what the email had been referring to? Had someone noticed the gaps in Claire's knowledge, or the family's presentation of the inheritance, and decided I should know? It was strange, almost surreal, that in a home I had lived in for nearly 3 decades, secrets could sit quietly on shelves, in planners, and tucked in envelopes, waiting for someone observant enough to notice. I felt a mix of fear and empowerment, fear of what these secrets might reveal, and empowerment in being the one to see them. I sat down on the edge of Claire's bed, surrounded by envelopes and notes, piecing together the fragments. A pattern began to emerge. Aunt Margaret's will wasn't as straightforward as I had been told. Certain clauses appeared to favor Claire. Yes, but they also hinted at obligations, potential risks, and knowledge gaps that could lead to complications if overlooked. The email's warning now felt heavier, more urgent. There was more here than anyone had let on, and somehow I had been chosen, or perhaps lucked into, the role of discovering it. The room felt charged, the air heavier than before. I could hear the faint hum of traffic outside, and the occasional bird chirp, grounding me in the present even as my mind spiraled through possibilities. Every detail seemed to matter now. The way Claire had brushed over specifics during brunch, the subtle pauses in Mom's compliments, Dad's unspoken hesitations. All of it felt like pieces of a puzzle I was now determined to solve. A knock at the door startled me. It was Ellie, our younger cousin, peeking in with wide, curious eyes. "Hey, Nova, you okay?" she asked softly. Her innocence contrasted sharply with the tension I felt, a reminder that some parts of family life remained untouched by secrets and hidden agendas. I smiled, faintly, shaking my head. "Yeah, just thinking," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Ellie nodded, sensing something unspoken, and left with a soft promise to check in later. Her brief visit reminded me that while some secrets were hidden, others, like trust and honesty, still existed, waiting to be balanced against the mysteries unfolding before me. Returning to the scattered papers, I noticed another anomaly. A small, folded note partially hidden beneath the ledger. Opening it revealed a cryptic message in Aunt Margaret's handwriting. "Trust only what you verify. Eyes can deceive." Goosebumps prickled my skin. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was a philosophy, a subtle warning, perhaps even a test for whoever was clever enough to read between the lines. I felt an odd sense of connection with Aunt Margaret, as if she had left me a challenge, one that required attention, intelligence, and patience to navigate. As I sifted through the documents, I found myself replaying past conversations with Claire. Certain stories she had told about Aunt Margaret's estate suddenly seemed rehearsed or incomplete. I remembered small contradictions I had dismissed. The way she described the sunroom as fully renovated when I knew it had been untouched, or how she claimed to have found certain keys that I had seen in the family safe months ago. Each tiny inconsistency now felt like a deliberate omission, a breadcrumb in a path I was only beginning to see. A sudden thought struck me. What if the mysterious email wasn't from a stranger at all? What if it was someone in the family aware of these discrepancies, nudging me toward discovery? The idea was unsettling. I had always imagined family as transparent and protective, not manipulative or secretive. Yet here I was, piecing together evidence that suggested otherwise. The mansion, it seemed, was more than bricks and hallways. It was a symbol, a trigger, a catalyst for unearthing hidden truths. I spent hours combing through the papers, cross-referencing dates and clauses, making mental notes of each anomaly. Every discovery added another layer to the puzzle. a forgotten document tucked behind a photo frame, a handwritten memo with vague instructions, a page from Aunt Margaret's diary hinting at unease with certain family members. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that what seemed ordinary, mundane, or overlooked in our family home had always carried meaning, silently shaping relationships, loyalties, and misunderstandings. By late afternoon, the quiet house had taken on an almost conspiratorial air. The sunlight had shifted, casting long, angular shadows across the floor, highlighting details I hadn't noticed before. The faint ticking of the wall clock punctuated my thoughts, each second adding urgency to the growing awareness that I had stumbled upon something significant. Not dangerous, perhaps, but certainly revelatory. The ordinary world of family brunches and Sunday routines had transformed into a stage for secrets, observations, and insights I had never anticipated. Sitting there, surrounded by envelopes, planners, and diaries, I felt a complex swirl of emotions: curiosity, excitement, anxiety, and determination. Claire had the mansion, yes, but I held the knowledge, the understanding, the awareness that things were not as simple as they seemed. The emails had been the spark, but the evidence hidden in plain sight was the fuel igniting a careful, deliberate process of discovery. And in that moment, I made a silent vow. I would unravel the truth, not recklessly, not with anger or vengeance, but with clarity, patience, and insight. I would understand the real story behind the inheritance, uncover the full picture of my sister's victory, and decide, calmly and thoughtfully, what actions, if any, I needed to take. The house was still, save for the faint creak of the floors and the distant hum of traffic. Yet within me, everything was in motion. Hidden secrets were no longer hidden. They were alive, waiting to be understood, waiting to be acknowledged. And I realized, with a mixture of awe and resolve, that the ordinary world I had known, family brunches, casual conversations, quiet afternoons, had always contained layers of complexity. Today, I had begun to see them. I sat back in Claire's room, surrounded by notes, envelopes, and scraps of Aunt Margaret's handwriting, when a strange calm washed over me. It wasn't the calm of resolution, but the kind that comes before making a decision. My vow to unravel the truth had settled into me, and with it came the realization that rushing, confronting, or accusing wouldn't serve me. If I wanted answers, I had to move carefully, quietly, observing without being noticed, and acting without revealing too much. When I stepped back into the hallway, the house felt different, as if I'd crossed a threshold. Every sound mattered: the creak of the floor, the muted hum of voices from the backyard, the clink of dishes being loaded into the dishwasher by Mom. They were ordinary sounds, yet layered with meaning. This house, these people, they were my family, but suddenly they were also suspects, participants in a story I hadn't fully uncovered. I realized then that my greatest strength would be patience. Watching, listening. At dinner that night, I tested my resolve. The table was quieter than usual, maybe because brunch had already drained the room of its usual cheer. Claire sat at the end, scrolling through her phone, while Dad picked at his food. I noticed little things: Claire's forced smile when Mom asked about her future plans in the mansion, Dad's quick glance at me whenever the subject of Aunt Margaret's estate came up, Mom's nervous habit of folding her napkin repeatedly. Each movement was a piece of information, subtle tells. I decided to start documenting these observations. Later that night, in my own room, I pulled out an old notebook and began writing. Claire avoids eye contact when mansion is mentioned. Dad watches me too closely. Does he know I suspect something? Mom, anxious, hiding something? My handwriting filled the page. Quickly, a release of pent-up energy, but also a roadmap of behaviors. The next morning, I acted deliberately casual, making myself a cup of coffee while Claire wandered in, her hair tied back, her tone chipper but strained. "Hey, Nova," she said. "Morning," I replied, watching the way she avoided my eyes as she rummaged through the fridge. "Big day tomorrow," she added, almost too cheerfully. "Oh," I asked, feigning ignorance. "Yeah, meeting with the lawyer about finalizing some mansion stuff." Her voice faltered slightly on the word lawyer. I sipped my coffee, pretending not to care. "That's good. Must feel exciting." She said quickly, then changed the subject. Her avoidance confirmed something for me. There was information she didn't want me to know, or perhaps didn't expect me to know. I mentally noted it down, another thread in the growing pattern. Later that day, I made a point to linger near conversations. At one point, I overheard Mom talking quietly on the phone. She was in the den, her voice hushed but distinct enough for me to catch phrases. "Yes, she doesn't know yet. Claire thinks it's simple. No, Nova hasn't asked questions." My chest tightened. "She doesn't know yet." The words repeated in my mind. Were they talking about me? About something hidden in the will? The realization sharpened my focus. Instead of barging in, I slipped away, steadying my breath. Barging would end the secrecy. Quiet listening would reveal more. That became my strategy, to remain invisible while gathering truth. That evening, I helped Ellie with her homework at the kitchen table. She was young, too innocent to be caught in the web of secrets, but sometimes children notice things adults overlooked. "Did you know Aunt Margaret left a box just for you?" she asked suddenly, without lifting her eyes from her math sheet. I blinked. "What box?" Ellie shrugged. "I don't know. I heard Mom say something about it once. A box with your name." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I smiled to keep her calm, but inside my thoughts raced. If there really was a box, why hadn't anyone mentioned it to me? Where was it? And who had hidden it? The following days became a careful balance of normal behavior and calculated curiosity. I joined Claire on errands, listening as she spoke to neighbors about the mansion as though it were already hers. I helped Mom fold laundry, watching her flinch whenever the subject of Aunt Margaret came up. I even chatted with Dad, who seemed both protective and distant, as though he wanted to warn me but feared what that might unleash. One evening, as Claire bragged about new plans for the mansion, knocking down walls, redesigning the garden, I noticed a flicker of unease in Dad's face. He interrupted her mid-sentence. "You should be cautious before making changes. Some things might not be yours to alter." Claire laughed it off, but the room froze. I stored that sentence away, carving it into my memory like a clue etched in stone. In the silence that followed, I made my own move. Calmly, I asked Claire, "Have you actually read every page of Aunt Margaret's will, or just the summary?" Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "The lawyer explained it," she said quickly. "That's not what I asked." I replied softly. She avoided my gaze again, muttering something about trust and professionals. I didn't push further, but I had made my point. Sometimes, asking the right question at the right time was more powerful than a confrontation. Late that night, I wandered through the house again. Quietly, my footsteps muffled on the carpet. In the attic, among dusty trunks and forgotten boxes, I found a small chest tucked behind a stack of holiday decorations. Its lock was flimsy, easy to open. Inside were letters, some tied with faded ribbon, bearing Aunt Margaret's handwriting. My breath caught when I saw my name on one of the envelopes. For Nova. I didn't open it right then. I wasn't ready. Instead, I placed it carefully back, deciding to wait until I had a quiet moment to absorb whatever was inside. It wasn't fear holding me back. It was a strategy. If I opened it too soon, emotions might cloud my judgment. For now, observing and gathering came first. The following days stretched into a rhythm of subtle moves. I asked small, pointed questions in casual tones. I studied Claire's planner for updates. I checked the mailbox at odd hours, noting that certain envelopes disappeared before anyone else could see them. And all the while, I wrote down everything, each inconsistency, each hidden hesitation, each clue that others might overlook. The house had become both familiar and strange, a stage where every gesture carried weight. But I wasn't the same Nova I had been at brunch. I had shifted into someone sharper, someone who valued patience as much as action. Revenge, if it ever came, would not be loud or reckless. It would be the quiet unfolding of truth, revealed piece by piece, until no one could deny it. And so I waited. I watched. I planned. Because in silence, I had found power. The silence in the room felt heavier than any words could carry. Asha's heart pounded as she stood in the center, her gaze steady, her breath controlled. Every detail she had collected, every hidden truth she had uncovered, had led to this precise moment. No one else seemed to realize how carefully the pieces of the puzzle had been arranged, waiting for her hand to set them into place. Does anyone here want to explain this? Her voice was calm, but its steadiness sliced through the murmurs of the gathering. She placed a slim folder on the table with deliberate care, the sound of its spine tapping against the wood echoing like a verdict. For a fleeting second, the people around her shifted uneasily, exchanging glances. Raj, who had always carried himself with the self-assurance of someone untouchable, leaned back in his chair. He smiled faintly, but his eyes betrayed the slightest flicker of worry. Asha caught it. She had been watching for weeks, observing the way his mask slipped in subtle ways. His charm had always fooled others, but not her. She had been patient, measuring every movement, every word, until the weight of his own actions would collapse upon him. "Another one of your games, Asha?" Raj finally said, his tone dismissive. "You waste everyone's time with these little dramatics." Asha tilted her head slightly, her lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. "If it's a game, Raj, then you've already lost." The folder fell open with a soft whisper of paper. Inside lay the records, emails, receipts, transfers, all the things he had worked so tirelessly to conceal. What he hadn't accounted for was her persistence, the way she had learned to read the smallest inconsistencies, to notice what everyone else overlooked. Maya, who had been standing quietly near the window, gasped when she recognized the documents. This can't be real." "It's real enough to end everything he's built," Asha said, her tone quiet but firm. She had no need to raise her voice. The truth itself was louder than anything she could shout. Raj's fingers tightened against the armrest of his chair. "You don't know what you're talking about." Asha leaned closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "Oh, I know. I know about the missing accounts, the false claims, the promises you never intended to keep. I know how you used trust as your shield. And I know you thought no one would ever look closely enough to see." For the first time, his composure cracked. The room sensed it, the shift in his demeanor, the faint tremor in his hand. "I told you once," Asha continued, her voice gaining quiet strength, "that every lie leaves a shadow. You just forgot that shadows are easier to see when the light changes." Maya stepped forward, her expression torn between disbelief and vindication. "Is it true, Raj? Did you—" He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Enough. These are baseless accusations. She's twisting facts, manipulating you all." But Asha remained calm. She knew better than to let his anger dominate the moment. "If you're so certain, then prove it. Explain why your signature appears on documents you claimed never to have signed. Explain why your accounts don't match the records." Her words hung in the air like a challenge that couldn't be ignored. The others began murmuring again, their trust shifting, their certainty unraveling. Raj had always been their anchor, but anchors sink too when weighed down with enough secrets. You set me up? Raj spat, his voice trembling with frustration. No, Asha replied softly, almost with pity. You set yourself up. All I did was pay attention. The stillness that followed was different now, not heavy, but sharp, as if the entire room had become an audience waiting for a verdict. Maya looked at Asha, her eyes wide with something that resembled both fear and admiration. How long have you known? Long enough, Asha said simply. But timing matters. And this was the right moment. It was more than exposure. It was justice unfolding in plain sight. Raj's power wasn't taken from him with force or vengeance. It slipped from his grasp because Asha had shown the truth, and truth has a weight no lie can carry forever. Raj's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. For once, he looked small, his grandeur reduced to the hollow shell of someone who believed he was untouchable. Asha turned to the others. You deserve to know who you've been trusting. You deserve honesty. Nothing less. Maya's eyes brimmed with tears, but her voice was steady. You did what none of us could. You saw what we refused to see. Asha felt a quiet swell of relief, but it wasn't triumph that filled her, it was clarity. Justice wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was a simple shift, a truth spoken at the right time, a steady hand uncovering what others had tried to bury. She gathered the folder and closed it with care. This isn't about revenge, she said. It's about balance, about making sure the shadows don't swallow the light. The others nodded, their expressions changing from confusion to resolve. Raj sank back into his chair, defeated, his voice little more than a whisper. You'll regret this. No, Asha replied, her eyes meeting his without hesitation. I'll live lighter because of it. For the first time in years, she felt the burden lift from her chest. It wasn't only Raj who had been exposed, it was the pattern of silence that allowed him to thrive. By breaking it, she reclaimed her own power. The room slowly emptied, but Asha remained, standing by the table with the folder resting beneath her hand. Outside, the evening light filtered through the glass, casting long golden lines across the floor. Maya lingered, her voice softer now. What will you do next? Asha breathed deeply, the air no longer heavy with secrets. I'll move forward, quietly but stronger. Justice doesn't end here, it just begins. Maya gave a small, almost reverent nod. You've won, Asha, not just against him, but against everything he stood for. And in that still moment, with the weight of revelation settling into something steadier, Asha finally allowed herself to smile, genuine, unguarded, victorious. The shadows had been exposed. Justice had found its voice. And in the quiet strength of truth, Asha discovered her personal victory. As Asha stepped out into the night, the cool air brushed against her face, carrying with it the quiet hum of a city moving forward. The weight of secrets no longer chained her steps. Every breath felt like a declaration of freedom. She didn't need applause, nor did she crave recognition. The victory was hers alone, carved from patience, courage, and truth. Justice had not arrived with thunder, but with steady resolve, and that was enough. With her head held high and her path unburdened, Asha walked into tomorrow, not as someone defined by betrayal, but as someone reborn in her own strength.